Testing. I'm saying some really important stuff right now. This is mission critical information that's going into the microphone. Hello, hello, hello. Testing, testing, testing. Testing. Hello. Are you calling someone listening to the stream? Oh no, he's listening to the stream. That makes a lot more sense. Oh boy.
I feel like you should. Do you want light like facing you?
No, you just have to.
Not really, honestly.
Like, it needs to be like.
there?
not
Yeah,
like,
just ambient. Or like point it up, you know?
like this would be good, whatever. Anything besides whatever that was.
Hello, hello. Testing. This is mission critical imperative information. This is the AV struggle.
Do you like the shell?
Yeah, this is sick. And
It's brand new.
look at the coloring.
And it's only slightly toxic.
Only little.
Only a
Only
little.
a little bit.
Only a little.
Yeah?
Smidge.
What does that mean?
Don't ask.
Don't ask. Don't ask while you're sitting next to it.
Ask after
Yeah.
the story.
Yeah, fair enough.
Don't lick your fingers.
Do we have another? You want to try to lab?
What if I just clip the lab to the...
You could probably put it in the middle. Let's just
Yeah, and clip it to the...
So we get clip it to the lamp.
Yeah.
I might put it this way.
Table looks really sturdy.
All right.
Is this ambient good enough?
Let's see.
If we're moving around?
Yeah, it doesn't have isolation.
We can speak up.
We can talk and speak up.
There we go. Yeah, move that back.
Yeah. Okay. Try saying something.
Hello. Testing.
Testing. Testing.
Can this hear?
I'm going to talk a lot louder than this. I'm actually going to talk like this because I'm going to be talking to the room, not to the people online.
Project.
Yeah. So if you can hear me now, then it's got probably background noise cancellation.
I think it's also aimed at Bryan, so that's the other problem.
It just likes me. This is actually a Bryan show, and all of the equipment is decided.
How about that? Is that better?
How about now? Can you hear
Can
me?
we test this?
Do I need to raise my voice or lower it to be on
It's
the?
definitely better, but it's like
If it's still on me, we can just...
We can go back and forth.
Well, no, we can... If it's pointed toward me, I'll just move it towards you.
Do we have a?
we have these mics. Let's see if these.
We could clip this onto here and use it,
Oh, that's a good idea. Yeah.
right?
Wait, whenever in doubt, use gap tape.
Oh, yeah.
That's another AV guy in the house. Oh,
Here's a little bit of tape if you need.
I don't know. I feel it's pretty
Is
firm.
it good?
I
Okay,
think it's
cool.
firm.
Yeah.
Tape everything down. If in doubt, things will go wrong.
We lost a good day.
All right, how's this? Can you actually hear me now? Can you hear me now?
Let's see.
Also, I feel like I'm a small child in a big chair. Yeah. All right, I'm gonna have to do this
Okay,
too.
it's good.
Yeah, we're good. Okay. All right. Tell me when we're starting.
Yeah. Yeah, you guys are good to start. So yeah.
Okay. Hey, look at this. Look at everybody out. Everybody out on a rainy, snowy, awesome November. Like, what? Shouldn't you guys be studying? Yeah, no, absolutely not. Thanks for coming out. This is a Shell Talk that is about Bryan Houlton, but the first time in Shell history, in my experience, I've been invited to come and interview someone for their Shell Talk. So, and I think this is because Bryan and I actually, you might not know this, I should reveal, we've known each other for quite a while, even though he is a recent Shell alumni. He actually came and visited me in Atlanta a few times when he was passing through. I gave him a tech HubSpot tour of that city, and I will do that for anyone who comes to visit me in any city in America when I'm there. I love doing like a tech hub crawl, and you just like go to every tech hub in that city and just get a sense of the geography. He took me up on that offer and came out and did that, and also kept in touch as he was going through all of these different phases of his entrepreneurship life cycles, which is what we're going to talk about today. But also, I would like to talk about what he's doing now. So we're going to probably start by letting him introduce himself. But before we get there, who am I? My name is Juliana Neilbauer. I am a senior attorney and partner at Fox Rothschild, which is an AmLaw 100 law firm. I'm also a former Sheller. I was in a pre-alpha batch. When the Shell was first formed, I was fortunate enough to walk by and convince the others who were the organizers of it to become a nonprofit and not a student group, so that they could have more autonomy and ensure that they could be a student-run group for as long as they wanted to be. And I've kept up with Shell just because the energy and the talent coming through here is unparalleled. I actually did not do my undergrad at the University of Maryland. I did it at the University of Pennsylvania, but again, the talent here is equivalent or better of any I've ever experienced in the collegiate level, so kudos to everybody in the room. And also, but I am a Terp. I went to the University of Maryland School of Law, and go Terps, and it has served me well. I'm currently attached to the Atlanta office of my law firm, but I'm also taking the DC bar, or waving in soon, so I'm going to be out of the DC office, and I live in Northern Virginia. So if any Shellers have any questions, I'm very often on the Discord, like in the guidance channel. I'm way too often in the music channel, so you can find me there. And it's good to see and meet you all. Bryan Houlton. Bryan Houlton, will you tell us a little bit about yourself on your entrepreneurship journey, at least? What can you tell us?
All right. Well, that was a very good introduction. Before I get into that, a few things. Number one, I would encourage all of you. I'm going to give away your time here real quick. Okay. I would encourage all of you to take advantage of not just Juliana, but all the people that have spent a lot of time, and especially alumni, giving back to Shell. Great resources that I honestly are underutilized. So many great folks that just like literally would love to talk to you about whatever you're working on and help you in any way possible. So take advantage of those things for sure. And secondly, this talk sounds very narcissistic. So I'd love to I'd love if we can do like questions during and all that stuff. Just like if you have thoughts or questions on things, like feel free to jump in. It's about kind of like my journey, I guess, but more so like what came of that and what can be replicated, what should not be replicated. All the things that could be helpful to you guys in some way, right? That's really what we're here for. So just keep that in mind as we're going through. But yeah, I'll give you the very brief overview and you can pick where you want to dive in more. So I joined Shell in fall of 2020, which was I think it was the first COVID batch. I'm not sure if anyone here was here for that, but yeah, it was a weird time for sure. And Shell was this kind of weird, esoteric thing where if you weren't in it before COVID, it was kind of hard to get into. I ended up doing some other stuff, not really being that involved in Shell, and then ended up getting back into Shell kind of sophomore year, meeting a lot more folks and just hanging out here a lot more. Also, we got the new space, so obviously a lot better to hang out in this spot. I ended up starting a company with a friend of mine from another university organization, the Smith Investment Fund. We were doing a bunch of...
Well, actually, say that again. So is anybody else in Smith?
Is anyone else in SIF? You're in SIF? Okay.
Yeah.
Do anyone know about SIF? Okay, one person? A couple people? All right, okay. For those that don't, it's a basically club. There's two sides. It's a fundamental investment side of just doing a bunch of essentially investment banking research and stuff like that. And also there's a quant side for all the people that are into math and computer science, just how do you trade stocks to make money. That was a super fun club to be in, and I started a company with two other guys in that club. And then after that, I started coming around to Shell a lot more. But we were also the first hatchery cohort, if you guys know what the hatchery is. We did some Dingman stuff as well. So kind of made the rounds around the UMD entrepreneurship community. But yeah,
To that, I would love to hear your thoughts on that community of resources and whether you think it was critical for you to get to the startup that you eventually were able to scale, that you got through that process of tapping into all those resources, or if there's some that you would recommend folks focus on more or less. I know this could be controversial, but I'd love to hear your actual. Yeah, I'd love to interrupt you for that.
Okay. I think there's like a few main resources. Obviously, Shell's the best. Obviously. Yeah, I think for Shell, the main thing you get out of Shell is, like as you look around, just everyone here, right? Just like the people that you're around are generally tend to be very high ambition, and like just have a lot of skills, can do a lot of things, which is very important. Dingman is great for. I would say that Dingman is pretty good for like connecting you to like the real world and giving you some capital. I wouldn't recommend spending like every waking moment in Dingman because, at least in my opinion, they have some interests that might be more educational and might diverge in some cases from the interest of the entrepreneur. But in general, like the people there are also very, very, very like top of their class, and very good.
I want to make one comment on that.
Yeah.
So on the Dingman, I wouldn't disagree with anything he said. I have lectured at Dingman. I have great admiration for the people who've run those programs over there and through the generations of them, too, who've run that. And I think that they are doing a great job, especially because I have actually done this at other university campuses, too, and I've seen similar entrepreneurship programs. And they often aren't as effective as what Dingman is trying to do. But the thing that is I would drive home is, I remember one time I was sitting in a budget discussion meeting with the Dingman team, and they went through some slides, and they had a bunch of grants listed, which is like non-dilutive cash for you guys, for student programs. And I think it was like $275,000 a year of just different categories of grant cash that they are expected to spend on student teams that come through each year. And if they don't, then those grant organizations might not fund them as a beneficiary of their grant again, because they don't need it as much, right? They'll give it to somebody else. And so they kind of need to spend that money every year, and not every year would they have a company that they know about that is in one of those buckets, like an industry bucket or the demographics of the team or whatever the reason is that the money is going to them. Winner of a competition within a semester program, not even like a full, like Dingman Center, main competition. And so if you're ever bootstrapping, I mean, the Dingman team is actually a great team. I really want to drive that home to talk to you about like immediate, easily accessible, non-dilutive capital that's just waiting to be spent on a team. How can, is there anything that might fit what we are trying to do? I would have that conversation. I would schedule that with them. And Lottie Byram is a great person to reach out to first. She might not be the one that you talk to because she's a busy person running a lot of those operations now. And there's a new director who you should also meet. But you'll try to get an interview at least with one of their staff about it, even if you're not in one of the courses attached to the Dingman Center, that you would find out about it directly.
Yeah, 100%. Knowing their incentive structure and like understanding that they get a lot of money can help you in a lot of ways. In general, there's money in a lot of places you might not expect if you just ask for it. Shell and Dingman are the two big ones. The hatchery's done a good job in the last couple of years of being a resource as well, but it's not as open to everyone. You have to apply to get into that. But yeah, I think that's my general take, is that Shell, Dingman, hatchery, but all for different things, kind of.
Got it.
Yeah.
That makes sense. So tell me, since we're talking about resources and capital, when I talk to Shellers and I say, what's the biggest blocker for you for scaling whatever you're working on right now? It's often like, I don't have a co-founder and I have an idea, but I know I don't have the full skill set to really take this to the next level, and I'm looking for a co-founder. That's number one. Number two is, we have a prototype. I have the right people, I think, but I don't have bootstrap capital to like take this all the way, and I'm a student and I can't do this full time, right? So I just need some cash. I need to go fundraise soon. Do you have any thoughts about fundraising while you're in college and trying to maintain being a student? Just all of that from your experiences with that. And could you talk about your experiences with doing that?
Yeah, I think fundraising from like venture capital, not just like grant funding, right? Doing actual venture capital investment is difficult while you're in college if you're planning on still being in college. The general expectation, at least in my experience from venture capitalists, is that like if they're going to invest money in a company, like basically what you're competing against to be their investment are people that are already full time on their company, and so it's a difficult sell to be like, I want to come and raise money for this company, but then I'm also going to go back to school next semester. So I think if you want to raise capital while you're in college, you should have the expectation that if you do so, maybe even if you don't do so, but either way, if you wanted to make that step, you should basically make a commitment of just like, I'm going to take a leave of absence. UMD actually has a great program for this, where if you want to take a leave, I forget the name of it, but I did one. You can basically just like register your company as like a co-op, I think is what it's called. Has anyone done this? You? Yeah. Okay. Ryan, you did a co-op? Cool.
That's Bryan in the audience. Are you Shell 2016?
No, it's like 20. I accepted Shell in 2014.
Oh.
Yes.
There you go.
Shout out to Ryan Fly.
There you go. But yeah, you can do a co-op, and it'll get you like, I think a little bit of credit as well, and it will hold your spot basically. To just hold your spot at the university. Where if you do it for a year and come back, it's no harm, no foul, right? So I would take advantage of that if you're looking to kind of really go full time on a startup. But I would avoid raising venture capital if you're not looking to go full time, because it's just going to take a lot of time to do that, and it's probably not going to be successful. It's not going to be a successful raise if you're not going to be able to go full time on it afterward. So yeah, that would be my general take.
Thinking back to when you were in Shell, if someone had said that to you, what would your response have been? What would you be sitting in the audience thinking?
I probably am not the person that the school wants to speak on this, because I was just kind of waiting for a reason to leave. Yeah, and so we got into the hatchery, and that was like some funding. I think it was 10 grand. Is it still 10 grand? Yeah. That was good. And then we got into YC like May of 2022. And like that was.
Some people might not know what YC
Oh
is.
yeah. Does anyone here not know what YC is? Wonderful. But we got into YC May of 22, and like their biggest question for me, because my co-founder was already graduating that year. The biggest question for me is like, if we fund you, are you going back to school? And I gave them like this really shitty answer the first time we talked to them of like, maybe, I don't know, whatever. And then they called me back on like an early morning. I lived in UView at the time. Called me back on an early morning, and they're on the West Coast. It was really early for them, but the partner called me back and was like, "Look, we want to fund you guys, but you're not allowed to go back to school. Like we will not fund you if you're gonna go back to school." And I was like, "Okay, fair, fine." And so that was like the process. And I think I caught a lucky break with that one, where it's like, I should have just given them the committal answer up front. So I think that we got, for whatever reason, we got kind of lucky in the sense that they just liked us enough that they wanted us enough that they would call me back.
Now that you're on the other side of going through the Y Combinator program and are an alumni in that group, which is also an amazing alumni network, by the way. I mean, just has amazing resources for alumni, which you can talk about. Do you know why they wanted you so much? Can you talk about why? Like, what are the elements of what they saw in you, so that others in the room can hear that too?
So I'll refrain from talking about myself specifically, but they do have kind of like not a checklist, but they do have criteria that they look for, and it's kind of universal across a lot of venture capitalists as well, and a lot of accelerators, where they want to make sure that, like, if I give you $500,000, you can actually make progress on this idea, right? Like, do you have the skills to be able to build what you're building? Do you have the skills to be able to like go out and talk to a customer and try to acquire them, right? And like that's pretty much it. They look at a lot at like your trajectory as a person, I think, as well. You know, if even if you don't have much experience, if you're like doing a lot of things that are putting you basically on the up, you're like doing a lot of impressive things really quickly. Even if you don't have like the credentials to put on a resume, that just like velocity that they see in you is what they invest in primarily.
Can I like drive home something that you mentioned two things, and I feel like having spoken to you and then other YC alums that those, it's really just about these two things, which is, can you build it? Can you sell it? That's it. Can you build it? Can you sell it? And if you can show objective proof that you can do those two things in any way that shows scale or the potential for scale, like it's just that simple. Can you build it with your existing team, not with a speculative, I'm going to hire the right person?
Correct.
And can I sell this with my existing team in this early stage? Can you explain why customer validation is so important to them?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that customer validation is really important. First to the startups themselves, not just to the venture capitalists. The biggest like thing that kills companies that I've seen is that people don't want to admit or find out that what they're working on might not be important to some people. And so like if you go after a market and you're like, we have this great idea of how to innovate on this market, and then you go talk to everyone in that industry and they're like, look, good luck, sounds cool, but like this doesn't solve a problem for me, right? That's a tough sell, because like what are you then selling them, right? You can sell them a product, but there's no solution that you're selling them, and so you're not solving a problem for anyone. And so I think being really honest with yourself about like, is what I'm doing actually solving like a burning need for these people, is really important. It's also not a binary thing, it's a scalar, where it's like you can solve a kind of need, or you can solve like an incredible like I would buy this yesterday need, right? And you can watch companies that are on the spectrum entirely and watch their growth. The companies that are kind of solving a kind of need, usually have to grow through a lot of manual effort of just like, we're going to be really good at, communicating with our customers, selling our product, all that stuff. The companies that are on the other end of just like, I would buy this yesterday, like Brex is a great example of this, right? If you guys know that. Brex. It's a bank for startups. Their pitch was like, back in 2017, if you're a startup, you couldn't get a credit card unless you were willing to put down as much money as your credit limit was going to be. So if you wanted a card with like a $20,000 limit, you had to give them $20,000 to hold. So it was basically like a pseudo debit card, which is wild to think about in hindsight now that we live in a post-Brex world. But like their whole pitch was, we know how to underwrite startups much better, and so we can just give you a credit limit that is way higher than what you've put down. And so that pitch of just like, we can give you basically spendable cash, in a bank account, was on the spectrum of like, I would buy this yesterday as a company. And so they sucked at sales and they were horrible at marketing, but it didn't matter. Like, people just like really needed what they were building. And so they would just crawl over the horrible sales process to get to it. And so you can kind of pick as you're trying to build a company, like where on that scale you want to be. Do you want to solve a meh problem for people? And it still could work, right? Or you can try and just like front load entirely on like, this is a really, really important problem for people. And if I can solve it, like people will crawl over the hot coals to get to there. Max. Ooh, good question. I mean, let's
restate.
okay.
Okay, so we just had a question from the audience from Max. Hi, holler to Max.
Yeah.
Where would you put Manatee on that spectrum of solving a problem that's, there's a real problem there versus a huge problem?
Yeah. So go ahead. I was gonna say, for those that don't know, Manatee was the company that we did after YC, and kind of that was my first company. The elevator pitch of that is that when you have software to sell, you like give your salesperson a demo account to go and like demo some people. We made your demo accounts really good. And so you could like the salesperson could customize the demo account without having to do any coding, right? They could change like everything about how it looked to customize it for the prospect they were selling to. It would reset every demo, you know, just very like bunch of nice things to have with the demo environment. You clocked it though, Max. Like 1 to 10, maybe a 4 or 5. And so the majority of the work that we did on Manatee to like get it to where it was that kind of like manual grinding work of just like finding exactly who this was helpful for, getting really good at messaging to those people, and like basically like the craft of doing the sales and marketing, right? And that worked. You know, we would close deals on things, and we did grow. But in hindsight, it's like, if I were to pick again an idea, there's almost no downside to weighting it really heavily toward like solve big problems for people. Because then you can just focus more and more on solving that problem than like getting good at sales and marketing. Does that make sense?
So I want to try that out too. So in other words, the YC model presumes that if you've got a really good build team that understands a market well enough to know what a really big problem is for that market, that you can be absolutely terrible at sales and still validate the market pretty well if you're solving a huge problem and everyone's jumping like a fish in your boat, right? So that's what they're looking for. Why did you get into YC if they could see that you were solving an incremental problem with Manatee? Tell the story.
So we actually didn't get into YC with Manatee. Because I came from like the quant background and ran that quant club, the first company that I started with my co-founder was like quantitative finance tools for the retail trader. And this was back in like the GME era, you know, peak times. And so there was a lot of eyes on like individuals trying to get into like algo trading, right? And so we basically built a bunch of tools about like, okay, how do you connect to a brokerage? How do you ingest data from the markets? Like, how do you do all these things that, you know, are infrastructure for like programmatic trading? We handled all that for you, and then you could just like write your strategy, and it would just go.
I see at least one.
It does not still exist. You should go join SIF though. You just knew about it. Yeah, you should go join SIF. A lot of the tech that we actually built was like, not like copied from SIF, but like recreated in a more productionized way. The crew there is really good. It's really good. So we got into YC with that, and we purely got into YC because we could just ship a lot of software really fast. You know, both me and my co-founder were just like hammering it every day. We were engineers, just like whatever. We're just gonna ship a lot of stuff as fast as possible, which was like a great signal that we could do that, and that we had the skills to build in most markets. It was a horrible signal that we actually like talked to customers though, because we didn't. You know, it took us until after we got into YC and they like finally hammered it into our heads of like, cool, can you get some users? Like, can you get people to use the thing? And we found a really interesting insight where all of our friends like from SIF, you know, were people that were into quant. And so we went to them, it's like, hey, we've built this really cool thing. Can you please, you know, can you use it in your free time? Do you want to use it? All that stuff. And they were all like you. It's like, this sounds awesome. I want to use this. There were a couple problems with this business where when you use a platform like this, there's only one of two outcomes. You make money or you don't. If you don't make money, depending on how stubborn you are, it might take longer, but you will churn, right? And so
Just churn.
Churn is like if you're going to use it, but then you stop using it after a little bit. So if you don't make money, if you're like losing money on a platform, you probably aren't going to stick around for like a while. And so that kind of disqualifies this section of people as being like good users, even though they might sign up for a little bit.
And were you giving strategy? No.
No, that was an important distinction. Is like we were not an investment advisor, we were not a brokerage. We just gave you the tools to build your own strategies. And then there's the second class of person, which is like good enough and smart enough to make strategies that make money. And the issue with that is if you are good enough and smart enough to do that, you probably already work at a quant firm, right? Because there's not a lot of you guys. And if you're smart enough to do that, you know, Citadel will pay you $1 million a year to do so. And when you work at a quant firm, in an internship capacity, in a full-time capacity, whatever it is, you actually can't legally trade the asset classes that you trade at work in your own personal portfolios. And so we would go to our friends and say, hey, do you want to use this? And they said, I would love to. I can't. And so it took us 8 months before we actually went to people to figure out those things. But in hindsight, those things are like, we could have found those things from month one, right?
Okay, I just have to say, I'm a lawyer, so I love a story where like your target user base loves your product, but is regulated out of actually being able to use it. Like it's illegal for them to use it. So well done with that. That's great validation.
So yeah, I would say that to go back to your question of like why is customer validation important?
Yes.
The most valuable thing that you have is your time, and it's important because like it will save you a lot of time if you just do it properly and like don't lie to yourself about like just don't cope, you know? Like if people like it, then they'll like it, and if they don't, then they don't. And like there's no amount of like frustration that you can emit that will change the fact that people don't like it. And so it's like the fastest thing you can do is just go figure out, does anyone like to use this, or does this solve a problem for someone? And if so, great, awesome, let's keep building it. And if not, let's pick something else, right? And so it's just going to save you a lot of time to like very rigorously validate an idea before you like really commit effort to it. Yeah.
So just to highlight, now that you are experienced at this, you're surrounded by other successful YC founders now in your community. You're out in San Francisco. You're in it. You must be getting ideas, great ideas all the time. You must be executing on them all the time. How many different product ideas have you validated this year? Just, or is it really easy now, or do you still go through the same process of trying to like be tough on yourself and like do that validation? Can you describe that?
Yeah, I think it depends. If I'm trying to figure out an idea, so for context, so our company got acquired. I left my job at the acquirer back in July, and since then I've been like trying to figure out what to do next, right? And so I've been in this ideation stage for a while. And if it's a market that I know really well, which is like I know sales and marketing technology pretty well at this point, and so if it's a market that I know well, I can be more confident that like my initial assumption about this is the problem is correct. Versus if I'm gonna go and like think about a problem in the electric grid, I know nothing about that, right? And so it's probably worth my time to go talk to a bunch of experts in that space to figure out, hey, is this actually a problem, and can I even have a chance of solving it? But for areas that I do know well, I think you can kind of trust your intuition for certain areas. But even when I do that, I use my intuition to like, okay, who am I selling to, right? Who's my customer profile? Go to them first. Either use them to help inform the direction of the product, which is also like a kind of a hack you can do. If you can get people to like want your thing enough that they will actually tell you what to build, great. Like,
Can you talk a little bit about your notion for customer discovery that you put together?
which one?
So we have a question from Ryan Ply in the audience, and it was, can you tell us about your Notion for customer discovery? And so Notion platform, right, where you can project manage yourself, right, track your projects, collaborate, and then also how you use it is really, it's a great tool example.
All right, I guess my internal is getting leaked here, but I didn't know I had shared that with you, but very cool. It's actually not even my framework, so I'm happy to share. There's a YC video talk recorded on YouTube by Dalton Caldwell, who's one of the partners.
We can share that later, by the way.
Yeah, we can share it out. We'll post in Discord. And it basically it gives you like 4 criteria when you're evaluating an idea. I think this is what you're talking about. Where you can rank an idea on, let me see if I can pop quiz this. There's founder market fit, there's time to validation, potential scale, and something else that I'm forgetting now. But I'll go through the first 3 and see if I remember. So founder market fit is like, okay, how much do you uniquely know about this space? And so if you're a biochemistry PhD and you are starting a company in biochemistry, pretty good founder market fit. Versus if I'm going to go start a company, electric grid company, terrible founder market fit. And you can rank that from 1 to 10.
Let me give another shout out. So Carter is like a excellent founder market fit for the
Yes.
startup he has chosen, just because he has a deep biological engineering, bioengineering, neuroscience studies, and then he's also doing a neuroscience application, a med device that's in the neuroscience space. Beautiful founder market fit.
And the reason that's important is like there are probably a lot of folks that can come up with your idea, but like Carter just has an advantage now. Like Carter just like is going to avoid pitfalls and things like that because he just like knows enough about the space that if I was to bet on a person like Carter in the space versus someone that comes from some other field that's not related at all, it's a very easy choice, right? So founder market fit is one column. There's time to validation, and this is kind of a personality thing about how important you think this is. YC likes it a lot because YC likes really fast iteration and just like finding your business, validating it quickly, and if not, move on. And this whole metric, the point of this metric is like how fast can you actually test and get empirical evidence that this thing is important thing for people to have, right? And so a lot of times if you're like going B2B, how fast can you sign your design partners? How fast can you like get folks to commit money that says, hey, when you build this, I have this money set aside for you, right? With B2C, it's usually like how fast can you get people to use your app, meet some usage guideline or usage benchmark, or pay for it if that's the model as well. B2G is probably different. I have no idea. Just selling the government, yeah.
I guess if you're hitting on B2G, you almost have to start going for RFI pitching.
Yeah.
And that's the way. So request for information, you want to try to get in on request for information requests that are posted by the state or federal or local government, and put in your comments. And if your comments are accepted and they affect requirements in the later RFP, the request for proposal, which is where you actually bid on the contract, then they liked your RFI response. Then that they're drafting it based upon what you recommended, and that they're really inviting you to bid and win the contract. So that's a little bit different validation.
I'll also give the example of the sustainability team. Where's Oliver? Where are you? Oh, right there. Yeah. There's an element of founder market fit and time to validation of like, it's important for you guys to be close to the university because you're selling to universities. And so like, if you guys were a bunch of dropouts, it might be a bit harder, right? So yeah, I think so. Founder market fit, time to validation, and you can rank all these on like a 1 to 10 scale, and then just sum across on each idea, and kind of then just sort your ideas based on the score. The third one is potential scale. Also depends on how much this matters to you. It matters to YC because they're an investment firm. But ultimately, like, okay, if you do this thing and it works, how big can it be? What's the potential payoff, right? It's kind of constructing this like risk-reward analysis for you. But again, it's kind of up to you guys. It's like, do you care about building something that's very large, or do you want to solve a specific niche problem for someone? Both are very valid.
Although, I mean, I agree with that. It's about what you want to solve, what kind of problem you want to solve. Are you very passionate about solving a specific problem because maybe it affects your family or your past or your friends? Go for it. Kill it. Use your entrepreneurial skills as a toolkit to do that. That is now part of your core fundamentals for what you're doing in your life right now. Do it. But you can use that toolkit for anything. And I would always push, especially Shellers, like, you've got your whole lives ahead of you, but at the same time, time is zero sum. And so why not, if you're interested in multiple problems and some of them are larger, why not go for some of the larger problems? Why not succeed or fail on the bigger bets? Because you're going to work just as hard. I promise you're going to work and strive and like struggle and have co-founder issues and the whole thing either way. So you might as well get the biggest impact for your effort that you can, right?
There's a good like Sam Altman blog post about this. It's called like Doing Hard Things or something like that, where he basically makes the point of like doing a thing that's hard is actually oftentimes not as hard or just as hard as doing something that's not hard. It's very counterintuitive. If you're going to go and build a company that's like a 5 out of 10 importance like Manatee was, in terms of how important the problem was to solve, there's like a lot of people working in spaces like that. And so you're like always fighting against a current. If you're going to go start a company that's like, I want to build a fusion reactor, A, not much competition. B, a lot of people will want to see that problem solved. And so you can get a lot of like basically a tailwind from people where there's going to be really talented folks who want to help you out. That could be investments, that could be connections. It's a great hiring pitch because a lot of folks will really quickly say like, look, if you can pay me 6 figures to work on this problem that I find really important, I will do that over any amount of money. You know, you'll attract the good folks away from like a FANG company, something like that. You'll get a lot of great talent just by having this like really core mission that people find important. I mean, that's kind of the tailwind that OpenAI got, right? It's like they set out this mission of like, we care about doing this thing. They also had the money, but that's different conversation. But they got a lot of great talent just because it was like they were one of the only people that were like bold enough to like go after that, like outspokenly and say, hey, we are doing this. We're going after AGI. And we're accepting the risks associated with that because it's going to be really hard and it will probably totally fail.
I want to be sensitive to time. We have like 9 minutes because we took our time getting set up here. We actually have little known fact about Bryan. He's actually an AV guy too. So we had an AV issue, but like he did not jump in and try to take over. And in fact, AJ and team like got it handled. So thank you for that. We've got a beautiful bodge here because we build things and we don't let problems stop us. But can I ask you some rapid fire questions? And then if anybody wants.
Like what people want to talk about.
Yeah, for sure. And I would invite anybody who wants to come and keep talking. Like we've prepared that we will hang out a little bit after, maybe do some Q&A. We might just take Bryan to the hall.
Or just go to dinner. Whoever wants to come as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, welcome to come.
I mean, it's rainy and
If
awful.
you're gonna walk.
But okay, I want to ask you some rapid fire questions. You've lived in Brooklyn, you've lived in San Francisco, you lived in DC. What's the best tech city and why?
San Francisco.
Why?
Talent.
Okay, wait, say it. Say that all
San
together.
Francisco for talent, 100%, and money.
Okay. Can you start a successful startup in New York City?
Yes, and in DC, and Atlanta, and in Chicago, and all these places. Like, there's nothing that's gonna stop you from making a company in any of these places. But in my eyes, if you're starting a company, it's like there's gonna be points in time where it's like just really hard, and it's gonna you're gonna have to make sacrifices to do so. And on the scale of what you might have to do to start this company, especially if you can, moving for it is not that big of a deal. And it's like it's just one of the questions of like, why would you not give yourself that advantage if you can? There's obviously folks that have different situations, but if that option's available to you, I don't see why you wouldn't deliberately make that choice.
Any caveats for your target customer base is in a different city?
Yes, good point. If your customers are all the banks on Wall Street, you should run your company in New York and then fly out to San Francisco for hiring and raising. And that happens a lot, actually.
Okay. Which is more expensive, San Francisco or New York, and why?
Like to live?
The real deal on it, yeah.
Oh, New York, for sure.
I found that shocking.
Yeah. If you guys don't know this, New York is way more expensive. The real estate values are like roughly the same, but you just get a lot more in San Francisco. But
Okay. Yeah, question.
What do you find the most challenging part about doing a startup still?
What do you find the most challenging part about doing a startup still?
I think my answer to this is a bit different because I'm solo founding this time. And I think by far the hardest part is maintaining conviction on a certain thing, especially while you're working alone. And you also get the tailwind of solving a hard problem. Like if you have a hard problem to solve where it's like, I want to make hydrogen energy, right? That's a really cool thing to do. And it's really easy to justify like that can be a life's purpose in your head. And even if things are really shitty right now, it's like, I can justify working toward that still, you know, or pick any other big problem that you care about. When you're working on a problem that's not that like hard and like probably not that important to a wide swath of people, that's a much harder justification to make. And even with the co-founders, this can also kill a company.
What are like 2 small or big distractions from undergrad that you wish you could have wiped away?
Can I say COVID?
Yeah.
I mean, COVID. Yeah, it's not helpful. Small, just 2, any size.
Yeah.
I think I
Should you date while you're founding a
I don't know if Juliana asked if you should date while you're starting a startup. Well, I'm not a subscriber to this, like, you must cut all joy out of your life while doing a company. I think to a degree, like, if I'm going to be miserable, I'll be less effective. And so, like, I still want to, like, have hobbies and, like, be healthy and, like, all those things. And that will actually net me more, output in the long run. And so, obviously it's a personal choice, but, like, I would not deny yourself of things that you think are, like, baseline things that you want to have in life just to run a company. Most companies can be done with, like, a 10-hour workday, 5 or 6 days a week. I would focus more on, like, if you're in that criteria of just, like, I might have to choose, how can you work better? Like, that's probably your next vector of where you should go. Max. Ooh. Real world thing that.
On the YC application, there's a long-standing question of what was the real-world system that you hacked? What was your answer, if you remember?
Yeah, it's like, give us an example of a time that you hacked a system, like exploited a system in some way. I actually don't remember my answer, and I'm not lying. I don't. I may have it like in a Google Doc somewhere. No, I may have it in like a Google Doc somewhere. If I find it, I can send it after the talk as well. But I don't remember. I'm sorry.
What would you say your core competencies are?
What would I say my core competencies are? The easy ones are engineering. Like I just am capable of building stuff that I say I'm going to build, which is really helpful. I think I can think very quickly and efficiently now, not before, about certain markets and opportunities. I think, like I can judge stuff pretty fast.
So he says he can think quickly and clearly to judge markets and opportunities now, not before. How could they get ahead on that and get that skill set now? Should they listen to a bunch of podcasts? Which ones? Like, what should they do?
I mean, podcasts are nice, but I think the biggest thing that's helped me with that is just like really distilling down the things that I care about, like things that I care about for myself and my actions in the world, but also like what problems I think are important, what things I want to service in my life. And these can always change, right? But just having like, I literally have a list of just like a living document that's just like the things that I find important, the work that I want, the kind of work I want to do, like the reasons that I do things, right?
So a different sheller from the past, Matt Marks, and I started doing this with other shellers, creating the core fundamentals list, just like boiling it down. And then you can use that as a lens. And Bryan and I did this exercise together so that you can use that as a lens for every decision going forward, pragmatic, romantic, life, passions, everything. And it's a good starting point tool, but there's more on top of that.
Yeah, I mean, what that lets you build is like a core set of predictions about the world. And like that's how you actually inform yourself about markets, is like, I make a prediction that I think X is going to happen in the next 20 years. Cool. I can now judge any potential idea that I have against my set of predictions. And so either one of my predictions is wrong or this idea is bad if they contradict. And so like, for example, I recently made the choice to like probably not work in sales and marketing technology again. And one of the core reasons I made that choice is even though like there was customer validation in certain pockets of this that I could have gone after, was like I think that more and more of our information work will be replaced by AI. And as a result of that, we've already seen sales start to slip. Like the actual sales job is one of the first ones to be replaced. And kind of just how we buy and sell software is like subject to a lot of change in the next 10 years. And so if I'm going to be building in the sales tech or MarTech space, I want to make sure that what I'm building aligns with that bet and not fights against it. Yeah.
So
AJ?
There's a question from the live stream actually. So Nathan Tablang.
Nathan Tablang has a question on the Discord.
Asking, what's your tip for builders who love building novel tech products who expect a lot of churn?
Okay, so Nathan asks, what do you recommend for builders who love building novel tech products but not a lot of churn.
Expect a lot of churn.
But expect a lot of churn of their users. Yeah, that's good.
Well, why do you expect churn?
Yeah, Nathan, could you answer live?
Followed up with another.
Okay.
Right. So Nathan's coming back with some more. Coming in hot.
So you said a lot of cool products out there start with
Oh.
being as a mere toy that becomes a really useful tool product later on. So I'm curious to know.
So he wants to know about the toy effect.
Yes.
He wants to know about those that give us a bad signal initially. They're almost too early. Like they're a toy at first. Everyone loves them. Users adopt them. They get a lot of churn. People use them for a week or two. And then they seem to go away. And maybe that is validation that they weren't solving a huge problem. They were just, something that was tickled everyone's brain. But then later they find their market fit. And suddenly they blow up again and become part of everyday life. How does your model account for that?
We have a term for this. There's a term that we've kind of coined in the industry called tire kickers, where like 90% of the folks that actually interact with your company and express any interest are tire kickers. What we mean by that is like they're just kind of here to like hang around and like maybe have a bit of interest, but like are going to be more effort for you to close initially than they're probably worth. And so just when you're doing sales for B2B or even sales for like B2C, just like, which is marketing and kind of conversions and all that stuff, you should really be trying to filter more than sell. Like if you're trying to like sell every person that comes in your door, you'll probably never develop a really good core sell to a group of people. And so like you should be really clear about, okay, we solved this problem for this very specific set of people. And like, if you're not a part of that set, we'll talk to you and like hear you out, but like, we're not going to count you as an important churn or an important prospect yet, because that way it's like you get really good at selling to this one specific set of people and you can like saturate that market pretty well. And then you kind of grow the scope of what your company can do, right? You add more stuff, you kind of add more products, and then all of a sudden that pool gets bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger.
Okay, but wait a minute. Aren't you validating this out? You're going to have pivoted way before you even get downstream to any of this if you're following the YC method. So how do you save these companies from the trash bin of YC method?
I mean, I would pivot when the group of people that you picked has rejected your product. And so it's very, very common to have a product where it's like 90% of folks are rejecting my product, but 10% love it. And that seems like a horrible rate. And it's like, well, if 90% of folks don't like it, then like maybe you should pivot. But like really, is there some like homogenous property about that 10% that makes them like a group that you can now identify and say, we're going to go after these guys first? Because if so, right, you found a niche actually, and the rest of the 90% aren't people you should care about right now. If there's no homogenous group that you can find about like why these 10 people like my product, then there almost always is. There almost always is some common reason that people are using your product and liking it.
But then you can decide, can you scale up from there?
Exactly, yeah. And if you basically, even if you can get a few customers, but there's no sense of like, we know who we're selling a problem for, and we know that there's more folks we can sell to, then you consider pivot.
Great. Any other questions before we? Yeah, go for it.
How has the startup scene changed over the last
So
time that you've been here in the scene?
at Maryland or
Startup scene overall.
overall? So we had a question about the startup scene nationwide because Bryan has touched it
I'm going
in.
to ask you to scope in a little bit.
He's gonna, but I also want your name.
Songjin.
Songjin as asked, and you're a new batch member or a current or like
Perspective.
perspective. Welcome to the room. I'm glad you came out. Okay, so we want you to scope that down a little bit. What is it that you really want to know about the scene, and what, right? Like what is?
How has it changed? Is there any like shifts, trends you see?
I have a general answer to this.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, so if you think about the incentive structure of founders, they're very like we're all very future leaning. We look to the future to see what we want to build, right? There's generally been, and I was talking to Ryan about this actually. There's been kind of a return to like the traditional roots of venture capital, at least in certain degrees, where it's like for the last 10 or 15 years, there's been a lot of money flowing into just like things you can validate really quickly and like that tends to be like B2C software or B2B software, right? And that's fine, nothing wrong with that. But there's a sense that like those things are going to become more and more commoditized in the next 5 or 10 years, as the cost of building drops down lower and lower. And so there's actually a return to things that have like really defensible moats. So things like hard tech companies that require actual like supply chain to be set up to like Anduril is a good example. A lot of companies, there's a lot more companies that actually have like research insights that they're building off of now, of just like, we are not only the commercialization people, but we're also the folks pushing forward this field, right? That's a big one. Robotics falls into hard tech for sure. Marketplaces, even if they're easy to build, will still have their defensibility in a commoditized software world. So I think if I was looking at a company to build in the next like 5-10 years,
Speak up this part. Say that again and speak up.
if I would be looking at a company to build in the next 5 or 10 years, I would look at things that are very hard to do, that are either physical world things or like have some component of the physical world, or on marketplaces, or have other properties of defensibility, like fintech. There's going to be some banking relationships and all that stuff that might be defensible there. Sales and marketing technology is one of the fastest commoditized software spaces, which has like kind of been whiplash in the last 3 years. Of it's so easy to get started by selling a tool in one of these spaces, because they're pure software and like pretty easy to sell. And so there's now so much of it that it's really difficult to find untapped areas that haven't kind of been exploited already. And so I would look at hard problems on like innovative frontiers that you can become an expert in, or things that have like natural defensibility.
Thank you for that. So we're already over time. So Ed, I'm going to say we're going to wrap up, but do you want to give a sentence about what you're building right now? Or do you not want to talk about it? Still stealth? All right. So if you want to hear about that, it's off the record. You got to come to the hall.
Yeah.
And for everyone online, sorry, you got to come to the hall. Got to get out of your dorm room or your apartment and come down to the hall.
Hang out and mingle here for a bit.
Yeah.
And then go
Probably around 7.
Okay.
All right. Thanks so much, Bryan. It was great to have you. Yeah. All right. And if there's questions,
Yeah,
guys,
go
like
for it.
feel